Looks like the stream is going. Tonight I'm doing kind of an impromptu Boxing Day Mythruna live stream where by request I'm going over to like fractal world generation in general, not just how it is with Mythruna, but just in general, kind of a deep dive into how you can procedurally generate worlds with fractals. Why would you want to use fractals? Well, we'll go into that too. So before I get started, I want to thank my patrons. You guys make it all possible. So real quickly, sort of the agenda for this is that I'm going to go over one of the old tools that I wrote back for, way before the original Mythruna. I probably wrote this 15 years ago, maybe, to play with different fractals and layering them together. And this will help us visually sort of talk about what the fractals are doing. Then we'll go into some more advanced stuff where I talk about, how I enhance that again with some Worley noise and Voronoi texture sampling kind of stuff for a random noise. And then maybe we'll play around with some fractals in the live mapper tool, so you can see how I sort of build up the fractals for Mythruna, and we can talk about more practical cases on how they get put together and stuff. And then finally, so there, we'll play with that. I'll show you where the current state of the existing prototype fractal is, and we'll show you. I have it ported over to Mythruna so we can play around with it and see what its current problems are and how to fix it. So that'll kind of be how we wrap up. So first, let's go ahead and get started. Let's see, I've got my chat over here. So I'm just kind of playing this by ear. If you have no background in this, so some of the new stuff, so originally, like when I first started terrain generation back in the 90s, the big deal was like diamond squares. So go ahead and generate diamond squares. So what diamond squares does, it takes a few samples. Oh, sure. Thank you for joining. It takes a few samples in the world. Let me do a 2D side view. Where's my whiteboard? Yeah. So, so it decides if you start with a point here and you have another point here and another point here, then so this what they call midpoint displacement. So the diamond squares algorithm will basically cut each of these in half, and move that up or down by some amount. And then what it does is, from a top view, it kind of organizes the map. The reason why they call it diamond squares is because they'll divide this map in half, displace these points, and then it'll do it again, on the diagonal. So you get these diamonds, and so it displaces this point, and then just keeps going and dividing further, and so on. And what you end up with is something like this, right? The problem is, for a whole world generation, this was really neat for one-off maps and stuff, but the problem is with whole world generation is, in order to know like what this point is here, you have to have generated all the points around it for it to figure out what that point is, which means you had to generate all the points around it. And there were techniques to kind of tiling this stuff. But generally you want, what you would rather have is something where you say, I want to know what the height is here, and math will tell you what that is. You don't have to sample any other points, you don't have to do anything else, but math will tell you what that is right there. So let's go ahead and delete this. So that's where we get into fractals, because fractals are kind of cool. And the very basic idea of a fractal, let's see, we can start with, let's say you have, without even noise, I actually don't think I have a sine wave here. Okay, so let's talk about Perlin noise. We don't have to be concerned so much with how Perlin noise works to know that it does, right? In a sense, Perlin noise will find you ask it a question about give me a value in 3D space, and it'll find some bin where it's got this sort of curves. It's hard to describe, right? And so you ask for what's the value there, and it'll tell you some value between I think -1 and 1. And then from there you can do different things, but let's just visualize it. It looks better. So this is like if we changed it down to 1, a frequency of 1, see, is it going to regenerate? Yeah, so you can't see anything. Oh yeah, it's because I'm doing it backwards. Anyway, so this is kind of what I was talking about, the corners of this box, and then there's some noise gradient in here, and you can sample it. And so if we like decrease the frequency so we can see, you see noise, and yeah, so this particular application will color things based purely on elevation. So the deeper it goes blue. Yellow represents sort of 0, and it goes all the way up to this pink for height. So these are just basically -1 to 1 values that we've projected into sort of a terrain space. But these kind of noises are kind of neat because as you start to layer them together, again, don't worry so much about the implementation of Perlin noise. Just recognize that in an XYZ space I can ask it for a value, and that'll be between 0 and 1. So in here I've asked it for an XZ value with a fixed Y. But let's say we add another Perlin noise to this. So it's yeah, so we can already start to see. So this is the lower frequency Perlin noise, where we've got big wide things. And this is the zoomed in version. And let's see if we can find the spot we're zoomed in on. I think it would be up here. Oops. Enabled. So we've got this little bulbous thing, and actually what I do usually for this kind of stuff is I'll just take the snipping tool and snip this out. So here we're kind of zoomed in. Oops. And so for here, we can go back and enable our, yeah, so it's this up here, right? This, we're half as much, so it's this corner right here. Okay, so this is the zoomed out version, and we're zoomed in. And so what you can do then is add these two things together, which is what this does. Yeah, well, we'll need to resample it. And see, yeah, so usually you want let's just lower these values to something more reasonable. Let's turn this off for a second. Yeah, so we've got just undulation here, wider undulation here, but you can see without this it's just boring. But when we add the other one in, now we've got more noise. And if you were to add another one in at maybe even a higher frequency, and we need to then do this thing here. So you can start to see you get kind of interesting terrain, and probably I really wanted to order these differently. But by layering different Perlin noise together, either multiplying them together or adding them together, you can build noise on top of noise on top of noise, and you get more complicated things. And there are different fractal implementations that are based on this sort of noise, and this particular tool has those already built in. So if we just go ahead and get rid of these, go back to the thing, you have like fractal sum, which basically runs through a bunch of Perlin noise and adds them together, and that'll produce some really interesting. Let's add the shadows back. So this starts to look like terrain already. So here we went through basically 5 iterations of that Perlin noise and changed the frequency as we went. And so you can move out if you want to see sort of the, oh, I went backwards. Huh. That's right. So you can see if we zoom out too far, like it starts to look too regular, right? This tool was meant sort of for the original Mythruna style maps. So this is, 1,000 meters on a square, if you want to think of it that way. And so then you can start, there's different fractal implementations. You can start layering them together. There's just different things. You get crazy, and after a while you sort of get an idea of how these different things work and how you can layer them together, and how much you want them to affect a given thing. So we make this additive, and then it's just gonna not affected. Yeah, so we barely added anything, and oh yeah, I did 100 instead of 1,000. So we've changed the scale. If I turn this off, you can see it definitely did something different. Anyway, so you play with these values, and like the original Mythruna was a stack of these fractals, and it looks something like this. Now, X and Y are swapped here, but if you've ever played the original Mythruna and the starter world Seed 0, we had the little half moon lake. There was a mountain behind you. You kind of started here. There was a little town built on this coastline. Again, pretend like this is mirrored along this diagonal. So that was the original Mythruna fractal. And so you see, just with some simple things, what it left. It's not going to let me delete that. Okay, hold on. Let me just make my picture clearer. It left the old one in, and it won't let me delete it. So you can see how just layering up three sort of simple, or actually it's only two fractals really, to make Mythruna have continental shapes. I add everything to this sort of spherical. It goes up and down and up and down and up and down, and so the idea was it would tend to form islands. You add the regular kind of fractal sum, which we were playing with a second ago, and then you add this ridge fractal, which gives it kind of these ridges that pop up. And that was the original Mythruna algorithm. It worked pretty well. The problem is, as you zoom out, it's just too noisy. It never has any wide open areas or anything like that. So that's sort of where we got started. And if you want to think of it visually, you take, if you even just took a sine wave, right? You took a sine wave like this, and a tighter sine wave like this, and you add them together, you get really interesting things, right? And so when that's noise and not so regular, you get some cool stuff. Cool, thanks. Okay, so yeah, I wanted to briefly talk about. Yeah, you're welcome. Hopefully you get a chance to watch it. If you have questions, just comment on the video, and I'll do my best to answer them. Comment later when you watch. Okay, so maybe let's just jump right into the mapper tool. So I have this tool which lets me edit fractals on the fly, and it presents them in sort of a map way. So this is just a constant. Oh, and if you've watched before, I talked about adding a horizon line, and I've done that now. So like if we were zoomed in, this is just a flat terrain with nothing. So if we zoom in and we can look around, now that's the normal. In Mythruna, that would be how far you could see. Each of these hexagons represents about 1 kilometer. So let's see. Yeah. Boy, when you really zoom in, it really zooms in. Okay. I think this was north. Yeah. We got some. The tool's a little weird. It's like it's my child, so I know how to use it. But again, all these tools are. This tool is actually available early access for anybody who's a patron. Just let me know. So if we start messing with things, let me move this over here so we can see what we're doing. I'll move this over here so I can see the chat and I can see the thing. So far we just have a constant elevation here. That's just this sampler constant. So basically this is 0. If we set it to, well, it's fine, it's 0. We don't want 0. 0 is kind of lame. So let's use this Perlin noise that I've created. And instead, if we just set it to noise and set the test elevation, what test elevation does is it figures out what the range of the elevation should be and projects it into the maximum, because normally these samplers work for between -1 and 1, and this will scale it so that negative numbers scale to the deepest ocean depth and positive numbers scale to the maximum build depth. So it's just for testing fractals that aren't already pre-scaled. In this case, like noise would not be pre-scaled. And if we set it, it's going to be like way too, yeah, in fact, it didn't even, the problem with a Perlin noise on its own is that the frequency is like 1 meter, so all of the noise is within 1 meter, and so every 1 meter you basically get the same sample. So what we would need to do is resample that. Basically say noise, but we want it to be stretched over a full kilometer, you know, 1024, right? 1024, which is like I call that a computer kilometer, right? Computer's like 1024, so that's the Mythruna kilometer. So we're scaling. So we'll sample noise 0 to 1 over 1024 meters. We won't scale y at all, and we'll scale z by the same. So now if we do this, yep. See, now we see our Perlin noise that we saw before, but now in this map. And if we zoom in, we can see it already looks kind of like hills and lakes and stuff like that, but it's kind of boring. And so then we can start, the idea is you'd start layering things on top of it, and so this will be like maybe a more visceral visualization of what I was talking about. So if we said, let's just do this, we sampled 1. So this is if we resample the noise over 1024 meters, and then we'll do another one if we resample the noise over, let's say, 128 meters. And so if we then just add those together, it should then make something more noisy, unless I screwed up. Oh. Resampled. Okay. Yeah. So you see now, we still see those larger noise structures, but now we also have it perturbed by a higher frequency noise. Now it's all evenly perturbed, which is not really what you'd want, right? You'd want this one to be scaled down. The tighter one, maybe you want to scale it down by 0.25 or something, so that, yeah, see, now we're starting to look like terrain, right? And so you build these up, and you know, you could do that, or you could just short circuit all that like we did in the other thing, and just say, I want my elevation to be a sampler rescale or resample of a new fractal something. Let's just do fractal new fractal sum. I think its only argument is the noise. So we base it on our noise, and it's going to loop over that. How many times is it going to loop? Well, that's where we set the frequency iterations. Frequency. So set it to 2, and we want, it'll be again between 0 and 1, so we want to make it stretch over a larger area. And so we do this, and I got something wrong again. resample, oh, I missed the, it's 3D. So you can see it kind of, just in 2 iterations, it did something very similar to what we were doing. It used a, like, not as high a frequency for its second pass, but as we up these values, you can see it's adding another layer of frequency in, and another layer of frequency in, and another layer of frequency in as we add, you know, more iterations. You can also, I can show you the math, in fact. So fractal sum. Yeah, so when you get a sample, it starts off at a starting frequency, which I think defaults to 1. And yeah, so then based on our current frequency of the noise that we passed in, you know, it then gets that, divides it by the current frequency, and adds that in, doubles the frequency and does it again, doubles the frequency and does it again, and so on and so forth. Usually, yeah, so you can set the starting frequency, and you can set how many iterations. There are more complicated fractals that do different things. Ridge fractals, one I was working on. I haven't actually tested it though. I'm hoping it has decent defaults, so we'll check it out. Where is it? Knitmap 3. So let's see what we got. So we've got our elevation there. Let's just wrap elevation in a ridge fractal. So it'll be the same frequency already. Let's see what happens. Oh, look at that. Yeah, so that's quite dramatic. The ridge fractal on its own. And probably you wouldn't do it like this, but look at that. That's pretty cool, actually. It's way dramatic, but yeah, you got all the buildings that are just kind of, so probably you would mix this in. So let's say we have ridge, and so basing it on elevation is interesting, but let's base it on noise, resample it in a similar way. So and then for this we'll just add them together for a minute. Well, first let me see what the fractal does on its own, because we've changed the noise source, so it's going to do different things. Yeah, so now it's based directly on the Perlin noise. Oh wow, that's pretty cool looking though. I'm glad I ported the ridge fractal, because it's one of the most fun as far as throwing high frequency stuff in. So let's say we want to add, start with elevation, and then we want to rescale the ridge fractal. Scale ridge, maybe just a quarter of what it is, and we'll add that to the existing elevation we've got. Alright, so that didn't really do what I wanted. Or maybe it did, and it's just so small we have to zoom in. Yeah, that's what it is. See, check it out. So we've got those ridge fractals now that make everything look a lot less smooth. Huh, it's interesting that, there we go. So now we've got actual, like, terrainy looking bumps. And so you can see how these sort of things start to layer together. And the other interesting thing is, let's for a second talk about a lower frequency noise. Let's for a second, let's comment these out for a second. And let's go back to our noise. Let's say elevation equals samplers. Yeah, let's, where's the one? I probably just deleted it actually. So what we're going to do is we're going to resample our noise at 1024 meters. So we get this nice loose thing. And actually, I'm going to make it even bigger than that, right? So we want maybe 4096, let's say. So we get these, you know, huge noise, right? And we can actually clamp that. So there's this sampler class. These are all part of a fractal library that I wrote. Oops, middle mouse wheel. I think that I can do like this, 0, 1. That'll clamp it so that, yeah. So it's always positive. And so what we can do with this is we can say, we can start to bring back our other stuff. So we had our fractal, and we set our elevation. And we'll call this the mix, right? So instead of this, okay, so this is our original no ridges, just fractal sum, right? But what I want to do is I want to mix in the, so let's say instead, let's look at the mix again, right? So I want to mix in the ridge fractal based on, you know, this fractal we've got here. So these areas, the ridge fractal will be maximum, and these areas, the ridge fractal will be 0, so we get nice smooth terrain. So this allows us to kind of control where that ridge fractal will be. So if we come here, oops, so elevation samples, we're going to add the ridge fractal, but instead of adding its scale directly, I think instead of scale, we multiply by mix. So yeah, so when mix is 1, we'll add the full ridge fractal at that particular coordinate. When mix is 0, we will add none. So let's check it out. So we should get our original fractal back mostly. And yeah, so if we zoom in, we can see these areas are still nice and smooth. But if we come down here to where we know, yeah, see, check it out. As we come over here, things get rougher. And so these are how you can layer different fractals together and have them not be universal. And you can have different parts of the world where maybe things are smooth and flat, and others where things are bumpy and rocky, you know, like this stuff. So that's kind of cool. I'll mention again, this particular tool right now is configured to just color based on elevation. I've got the climate models turned off because that requires a recompile. But anyway, so we've got, you know, that's kind of cool. And actually, we can make it even more dramatic by scaling this. Yeah, so let's scale the mix up like twice so that it's like these ridges are even ridgier, right? So now you start to see the ridges form. We still get these nice smooth areas over here where there are no ridge fractals, and then we get over here, we get the big giant ridge fractals. And again, that's how you can layer things together. You know, I don't want to go too much into detail. This is a big, deep topic. If you want to play with this tool, again, it's available to early access. You know, even just $1 of a patron will get you early access, but it will be released later in the year as part of the whole MOS tool set. But yeah, see, we're already getting some interesting things. Now, this is obviously too high frequency, and there's no continents, and that gets tricky. And so I can talk a little bit about how. By the way, if anybody's watching and has questions, just let me know. I can talk about how I've been constructing the regular Mythruna fractal. So let's stop this one and we'll go back to oh, interesting. Okay, so let's so if true, yeah, so we regular Mythruna, the new Mythruna fractal starts the same as all of them, right? We've got this high frequency fractal that we use for some stuff. And I can show a little bit about how, oh, let's talk about Voronoi noise, Worley noise. Because it's slow, but Worley noise is really cool. That's what this cellular noise is. While that's generating, I could talk a little bit about what cellular noise is. Yeah, you can see it here. So this is what cool cracking terrain kind of stuff. What it does, if you want to read about Worley noise and Voronoi textures, I highly recommend it. But let me see if I can pop up that image. That's not it. Yeah, I've still got it in my slideshow. If I see, so you're gonna hold on while I step back through the slides, so you guys can see the slides. So we see how this related to the map we were just looking at, but this is really where the magic is. And what it does is, within a cell of grids, and I'll go back. So you probably can't see my mouse right now, so I'm going to go back to the map view. Oops. If I click in the right places. Okay, so let's actually do the non-inverted cellular noise. Really should have checked the names of things before I started this. Where's the Fractal library? Too many things open. Yeah, I was cramming a bunch of stuff into Mythruna over the past few days. Okay, so we're down here actually. There it is. Fractals. So cellular noise, I think, is what I want to see. And just takes a seed. And I didn't. There we go. So if we just check, if we turn off this inverted bit, and let's see what happens. I think just this. Oh, it's combining two things together. So that'll be interesting. The problem with cellular noise, so I'm trying to I think if I just find the actual image, then I can point at it and stuff. Oops, that's not what I want. Images. Screenshots. Sorry. Worley noise. So that's the Worley noise. And yeah, so this didn't really do what I wanted. It's putting those dots in the middle. That is sort of germane to the conversation, but essentially what it does is it divides the world up into, or divides the space up into a grid. And in each grid cell, I can pull up my whiteboard and show you. So it divides the space up into a grid, and in each grid cell, it decides a random point. So in here, maybe it's decided this is the random point. In here, maybe this is the random point. In here, maybe this is the random point. And so on. Each cell gets its own predictable random point based on the noise. And so then each sampling that you do in here is determining the distance to the nearest point. So these would be distance to that one, distance to that one. This one might be in between, so distance to that one. And so you see there's kind of like this line where these things start to come together and so on. And anyway, it forms these sort of cellular looking things based on the distance. These are the distances from all those points, which looks very organic. And the oops, yeah, so then there's the Also got the so the Voronoi noise. So this is the one that directly goes with that other one. Yeah. So there we go. So you can see these. There's like these imaginary lines here, and that's what this one is showing, the imaginary lines. And so as a source of noise, these are quite interesting for making things look more organic. It's just really slow because for every time you sample, it's got to find out where that nearest point is, which means it's got to sample potentially the cells from all around. You know, in the grid, it has to sample the cells from all around to figure out which point is closest and then calculate the distance to that point. It is non-trivial. And so I have to figure out how to make this faster because it's kind of slow. But this is the basis of some of the cool stuff that I've got going on in the new... oh, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, so we got that noise, and then, you know, I can add some jitter to it. Yeah, which makes the, you know, takes these edges and perturbs them a bit. Yeah. Oh no, that's right. This is the high frequency noise. So I needed a really high frequency noise, and so I used this temporarily, but I think there's a faster way for me to get a cool high frequency noise, and so that one's not interesting. I think that this one is similar. Yeah, so these are just two different high frequency noises that I wrote, and they all get put together. They're the ones that create the jitter, so that if we resample cells, we'll show you how this works. Assuming it's not going to bomb out. Again, it's just so slow. So what this did was it took those smooth edges and it made them bumpier. That's what I was going for here. It turns out in real life they're still not bumpy enough because we need, you know, some bumpiness up and down as well. But it did exactly what I wanted it to in the end. So let's say no, we don't want to show that. And so now we've got low frequency cracks. So this would add cracks to it. I'm just building this up. Oh, so these are just the low frequency cracks. Again, using that Voronoi noise. And then I mixed those two together and some higher frequency cracks and built random height plateaus. You can kind of see how it basically samples, uses the Voronoi noise and then uses a regular noise to sample how high each of those plateaus should be based on where the Voronoi sample was. And anyway, it's not useful on their own, but mixed with other things. And of course we can add in the cracks that we've been working on, the big high frequency cracks, low frequency cracks. Okay, come on. Yeah, optimizing this particular filter or noise was something I was doing this afternoon. But I'm not sure I'm going to be able to use it in its regular form. We'll see. I have some other ideas that I want to mix in with it. Yeah, there we go. So now we've got some rough edges, random cracks, and it starts to look kind of like something you might see in a sci-fi or fantasy world. And that's what was interesting to me. And so now we go into more general stuff where I go back to a regular fractal. I'm trying to make continents. So I want the basis for continents such that if you were to sail around the world, you could sail around continents and they wouldn't just constantly join. And so I worked this out. It's not perfect because you can see there's this kind of, these all connect and there's no way to sail across. But if we start adding additional noise, so this is even larger scale noise that I'm trying to figure out how to build even bigger continents and factor those in, and so on. I left myself little comments as I was reverse engineering this. I wrote this fractal months and months and months ago, and I had to reverse engineer it today to figure out how to. So now we've got this, which I think combines these in a way. Yes, let's talk about what this does. So this one was the one, we called this one resampled, and then we raised another noise. We raised it up by 0.1, so it's a little higher, and that's the big one that we looked at before. And then we've got this one, which does it again, I think. Yeah, so this is another large continents shapes. I think this might be the one I actually use. Yeah, okay, so now we're starting to see continents. Again, I would have rather these not be joined together here. But it's, this is as far out as I can zoom, and this is like huge distances because already this is as far as you can see, so that's 8 kilometers. And so you can walk quite a bit before you ever get to the edge of that. And if we come down here, we get again, oops, rescaled to terrain elevations. Yeah, so that's the same. Now we start to find transitions. Like I want to mix these things together. So I have like a really hard mix for some things, and this with some smooth edges. So this allows to blend like mountains, but still have like some transitions and some cliffs. Kind of like in that earlier example I showed before where I was mixing in the ridge fractal. If you can imagine mixing in a quote-unquote mountain fractal that you've already predefined to build mountains instead of flat rolling hills, then here you would transition smoothly from a flat rolling hill to a mountain, and here you would transform really abruptly. So that's one mix we've got set up. Then there's another mix which is using sort of cellular noise, I believe, to oh no, this is the smoother one. So this was even smoother mountain transitions. Yeah, see, I got to relearn all this stuff. Oh man, I just screwed up. Okay. And so these are the sparse plateaus, very spread out, because we've mixed some things in. And so it's basically solid cutting those off. That's with the harsh mix that we just saw, not this mix. Yeah, you can always tell it's using the cellular noise because it takes a long time. Yeah, so see, these sparse guys here are just where that fractal, that other fractal, bumped up with a kind of a hard cutoff. I think in here there's a step. So, in the OpenGL shader language, there's the idea of the step. So anything above 4 becomes 1, anything below 4 becomes 0 in this case, because that's the edge we've set. And so we've, multiplied and so on. So that gives us that sparse stuff. If we come down here, these are the mountains I was talking about. So I have a mountain fractal that I'm going to mix in. I've decided these are what mountains should look like. And I'm going to go back and add a ridge fractal to this because I didn't have one when I wrote this before. And it turns out these look pretty smooth, and it turns out in the game they are really smooth, and it's annoying. They need to be less smooth. And so that's the mountains. We're going to start mixing these all together, I believe. Okay, so yeah, we've got our continent again, which I squared at this time. So did we get more? No, we're still connected here. We're a little more disconnected in some places, and we get some islands scattered around. And so this rough continent-shaped areas of sparse plateaus with smoot transitions. So this is starting to look like what I wanted. Oh. No, that's just the mix. Okay, so that's the mix. Again, I'm reminding myself what the mix was. Again, this is basically, you're seeing the fruits of my reverse engineering. And so this is rolling hills. We're going to mix, this will be the basis of everything. Yeah. We'll mix those in. And I think I had like a comment on how this all gets mixed together. Okay, so those are the rolling hills. And then I use a trick to find the part that's underwater, because I'm going to add that back in later after I want the parts that are underwater to stay even after I've clipped the parts that are above the water to different fractals. And so, you know, I multiply the stuff by, anyway. There's math that goes on to scale the negative parts that we clamp to be between 0 and 1 so that we can add them back later. And if you want to see what that looks like, it's you can kind of see how it compares. Okay, so that's actually, that's the, I'm sorry, that's the continents again. It's a smoother version of the continents. Again, I'm just exploring fractals as I went, but this is how you kind of use this tool. Let's see, what did we do? We clamped negative hills. Yeah, so this is all, yeah. So these are the parts we're going to add back into the underwater parts, I think. I'm just kind of rambling now. So let's skip closer to the end, because yeah, we mixed mountains. So this is showing where we're going to put mountains. Yeah, see, we've clipped off. We'll have mountains here and no mountains in between, and which will be the rest of the fractal. Yeah, we have mixed cracks, that's just similar to before. Mixing in the cracks, mixing in the rocks, mixing in the rocks. And so when we get to the end, we should have all of the stuff back, except for I've screwed something up somewhere. Oh, I know what I did. When I set the elevations this way, I have to invalidate the map view state. Yeah, there we go. And so this is, when in my prototyping, this is what I had all put together. And you know, we layered in some things. The mountains get layered into regular terrain, and the continents pull it up so that, you know, stuff is kind of large land masses, and it all gets layered together and makes some cool looking terrain that I thought was pretty cool. And certainly it was useful for playing with cities and towns and roads and things. And, you know, nice cool plateaus out in the ocean here. As it turns out, you know, I've moved this over to Mythruna kind of as is, and you know, these, when we zoom in here, and it'll take it a second to pull in. Yeah, so now, so it's fully in. It looks really smooth, and it turns out it is really smooth, even in the, and these look super dramatic, these cliff faces. It's more dramatic even than it looks. The Mythruna engine doesn't like these vertical walls very much, and they don't make any sense. This is, if I move closer to the edge here, it shows that my ship here is 252 meters above sea level. That's kind of a crazy cliff. So something needs to be done about that. And then the picture I took and posted earlier, which was, or showed at the end of the slideshow, is from me over here on one of these plateaus looking towards this sort of mountains off in the distance. And again, these are kind of too dramatic too. These cracks go all the way down to sea level. So it was an important step. I actually had an inkling that all of this was true, that yeah, the tool sometimes takes a while to catch up. That these were going to be too dramatic, and I wasn't going to be happy with them. I also don't think I'm happy with how flat the flat parts are, but I need to play with that a little bit, and I'll show you what this all looks like over in Mythruna. Okay, currently I'm standing on this plateau, and I think yeah, okay, so we've got that queued up. So we'll exit out of there, we'll go into Mythruna. Good timing, the Pepsi's almost done. Okay. Come on, Mythruna. Way faster than this. Yeah, so this is that fractal that we just looked at loaded into the Mythruna engine. And there are some bugs in it where the ocean gets too deep and it creates some weird anomalies, but it works for what we're doing here. So hold on, things load in. So we've got you see we got these plateaus we're standing on. They look kind of cool, but they need to have some more slope to them if they're going to be that tall, because it's a little unrealistically tall. It can create some new stuff. This is actually some of the more sane areas. We've got like a river that drops down there, which is why that looks weird. Problems with this is you can see that crack goes all the way down, like it goes all the way down to the water, and that's not realistic. Got to fix that. I think I might add some variation even to the tops of the plateaus. I think they're too flat. Let's head over to this. Yeah, so see, this is not too bad. These rough spots turned out okay, and that's a river that's coming down, which is why that looked weird. Again, if these had some slight hills on the top, I think that would be better. Or maybe ridge fractal just to give it some rockiness. But so we got, it's kind of cool. It's getting there, right? The other thing is there's some, I've noticed others have reported this too, there's some problem between the far terrain coloring and what shows up when the high-res terrain shows up. There's a discrepancy there, and we can see that pretty clearly here because these are brown and this is gray, and sometimes these brown areas turn out to be green when we get up to them. Yeah, this is going to make a liar of me because these are going to be exactly 1-to-1. But you can kind of see, yeah, something I added recently causes this to hang when there's lots of terrain being generated. That's got to be fixed, because that's no bueno. Tends to happen when I'm going extra fast. But see, that mountain looks okay from over here, but if I were to go there, the terrain is way too smooth. And you can see, yeah, so there's a scale problem. You can see that big cliff I talked about over there. Actually, we can just teleport over there, so hold on a second. Let me get to stopping place here. I think if we do this, we should be able to pull up what the coordinates were. Yeah, so that's over here somewhere. Let's enter those coordinates in our warp, because we can do that now. 1 0 3 6 6 4 7 1 0 3 9 7 3 4. Choink. So yeah, see, we're on the edge of that cliff. But this terrain is too smooth. Even the the prototype stuff that you guys get to play with is better than this. It's just way too smooth. It's okay if every now and then we get some smoothness like this, but all of the mountains are like this. The other thing is I don't know if you just saw, but the coloring is wrong. So that looks gray, right? That's supposed to be rock. If I come over here, it's going to turn green for some reason. So let's check it out. So yeah, see, this is turning into grass and it's supposed to be rock. Yeah, it's definitely supposed to be stone. So there's something wrong in the fractal generation, and I think that's been true for a while. Because if I edit any of this, if I add a block to it and pull away, that section of the world of the far terrain turns green again. So somebody is confused about what grass is and what stone is, and it makes for a less fun. But you see there's some goodness to this. That kind of looks cool. Makes me want to go over there and check it out. The let's see, sun's coming up, so we can barely see this far thing. But that's where we were before all those plateaus. Oops. If I yeah. So you can see all those plateaus over there. They're kind of in the distance, and there's desert area here. If we look back at this map, we can see we're standing kind of right here on top of these mountains, looking off in this direction. So anyway, there's a lot here to unpack, right? Everything is details, and this is what I'm going to be doing for the next few days, because I need to start finalizing the world fractal so that I can start generating towns and dungeons and blah blah blah. Because that's one of the things that once I get the framework in place, I can perseverate over in hour blocks instead of, some of this looks really cool, right? Cliffs off in the distance. Just need to tweak it. I think I'm on the right track. Does the far rendering just use the color on the top of the column of blocks for the sides? Yeah, kind of. It gets stretched. So that's the other thing, is when terrain is way too dramatic, it causes problems. But mostly it looks okay, right? So this looks okay. If I flew over there, there's going to be, so down here, there's going to be some amount of dirt in here. Oh, no, that's what it is. The grass, specifically, the grass texture knows that sides should be brown and tops should be green. So when you get grass that's on a steep slope like this, you'll see dirt peeking through, because when you get up there, there will be dirt on the side, right? From the side, that would look like dirt. So let's fly up to this cliff. I haven't been up here. I want to see the cliffs off in the distance. Man, generated a lot of skulls over here. Skull, skull, skull. It's a pirate area. I guess this is where the pirates live. It is funny because there is a port that gets generated over there when I have the look at all these trees. Let's see if we can get past the trees or laying on top of them. So that looks really neat. I don't know if I can. Yeah. Hey, let's can I put a block on top of one of these? There we go. Ah, come on. Alright. So yeah, there's a bunch of skulls over here, and in the regular map, when it was generating, so we're standing here looking at this direction, it did actually generate a port down here because it figured out that sailing routes could come through this channel, and even I think through this channel. And so since there was a mining town here and some other things, it decided there should be ports there. It's not wrong, but it was kind of cool. And so now I can actually go there and see if that really is a passage through. Let's see, this looks kind of cool. It definitely makes me want to go over there and check it out. but they need some work. Need to, first of all, make that more efficient. The other thing, the problem with one of the reasons that it's so slow is that cellular noise is super slow anyway until I can figure out a way to make it faster, but it's also generating, it calculates the cellular noise, 3 different kinds, even for the smooth stuff where it already knows it's not going to use it. That's because these algorithms, this way, the way I wrote it, just layering things together, it doesn't take into account how things are going to be mixed in the end. The real version will be hard coding a lot of this stuff, so it only grabs a sample when it needs it, and so if we already know that we're not going to be mixing that in, we're not going to bother grabbing a sample from it and stuff like that. We know it's already going to be 0. So the real code will be a little smarter. But anyway, it's kind of cool. This is sort of golden hour, so it makes it look better too. So anyway, that's where we are. Yeah, see again, I think this terrain down here is too smooth. All right. I think that's all I'm going to cover tonight. We're right at about the hour mark. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to just fly over here for a minute and you can ask them. If you think about it and you're watching this and you weren't on the live stream and you have questions, just ask them in the video and I will post a response. If there are enough questions or more, if somebody wants to go into something more detail, mention that too, and I'll consider making another one of these if I have like some more targeted information to share. Wow, there's a bunch of come on. Looks like those are gallows. So not only do you have a bunch of skulls over here, but oh boy, where do we go? Okay. Not only do we have a bunch of skulls over here, but the whole place is covered with gallows. So the pirates take no crap over here. Throw a rope over and hang us, Yeah. So it's kind of cool. Random can be kind of neat sometimes. At any rate. So I think that's all I'm going to do tonight. Thanks for joining. Oh, how does the ridge generator work? Okay, I can look at the math for that real quick. I don't know that I can explain it well, but this is what the loop is actually doing. So it kind of loops over the octaves similar to the other things, but how it mixes it together is it sort of has a signal and a threshold. Gosh, how to describe this? Well, there's the math. It's I copied it directly out of a book. But yeah, so yeah, we make sure that the kind of also how are you do trade routes, etc. Yeah, I don't know if you were here on Friday when I did the live stream. I went a little into that, but I have a prototype algorithm that goes through, it analyzes the terrain to find the large bodies of water, shallow water, places that would be good for farming, places that would be good to harvest trees, cliff faces where it might be easy to mine. And so it builds sort of a frequency map that it then uses to find out, based on some other rules, like that there should always be a point of interest within 1 day's travel and so on and so forth. It figures out where to plot the towns, where they were likely to form because there's lots of natural resources there, or because they're on the way between 2 other towns and so on and so forth. Or they're on the coastline and there's fishing, or they're just on the coastline and there's lots of good places for a harbor to be. And so then it plots all those and then plots roads between them and sea trade routes between them. And there was if you want to go back and look towards the end, you can skip towards the end of Friday's live stream and you can see all that visualized. It takes a while. Actually, I could show you real quick. It just sometimes takes a while to render. But in this mapping tool, I kind of have that stuff commented out. Real quick. Because I think it's cool. And hopefully I didn't comment all of that out. Oh, oh, you know, all right. Yeah, it kind of drops down a deep hole because I've got some stuff commented out that are necessary, like the climate models and things. Like it needs to know desert from. So you could say the trade routes is not a local algorithm. Correct. Trade routes require you to generate lots of stuff. So on a basically trade routes, cities and towns get generated on a 16-kilometer square, what I call a sedectile. I'm holding like a square up with my fingers here, but let me add back the climate model real quick. This is sort of germane to our conversation. So if we add back the climate model, then we can see where the deserts and the trees, forests, and things are. And so yeah, so now we see, you know, desert areas, green areas, and if we go into this guy, I should be able to random names, spawn locator, border, rivers, settlements, roads, balancer. Let's just uncomment everything and see what happens. It just takes it a while to generate all that stuff. But it goes through and so the idea being that wherever you generate into, it's got to at least figure out where the towns are going to be for that 16-kilometer square plus all of the adjacent 16-kilometer squares, so that it figures out how to plot the roads and the trade routes between your 16-kilometer square and the neighboring ones. And then in the background, it will have to do that for all the neighboring ones and so on. Same with the rivers. You know, that's how it plots the rivers as well. It's got to plot them. If we ever want them to cross 16-kilometer boundaries, they've got to be processed at a higher level, and so they can bleed into the next one. And so it'll hopefully the grid lines show up when I do this. But I see it's making the rivers. Oh, we're making roads now. So it's figured out where the towns are, making the roads, and it made all the markers. Why aren't we? Okay, still working on roads. Roads take a long time to plot sometimes. Yeah, so all this has got to be done in the background. There's got to be sort of a minimum amount of generation when the world first starts. And this is all written in Groovy and just kind of, yeah, oh, cool, look, it did it. So this is what I was talking about. These are the 16-kilometer squares. And so wherever the spawn location's in, it has to plot the towns and points of interest for that and any of the surrounding ones. And then from there, it can plot the roads and see trade routes between these and the center one. And then, you know, in the background, it can be then doing this for the next layer out, because it wants to have it already ready in case you cross one of these boundaries. And then if you cross one of these boundaries, it would have to do it next layer out and so on. So that's the part that I have to build in this week, is sort of the major pieces of generating the stuff. Even if I don't actually generate anything, I need to build out the framework for saying, okay, we're in this tile, I need to generate this tile and the surrounding ones. And if we cross that, you know, I need to have generated, in the meantime, doing it in the background and so on, so that I figure out which roads go from here to here and so on. But these are kind of cool. So it figured out, you know, where towns should be, and the colors mean things. Here we've got a bunch of different possibilities for ports. We've got like these blue flags that go around show like how many sea routes would come through here, and the white ones show how many roads would come through here. So you could change. Would you want a local algorithm to make trade routes to avoid the boundaries? There's just no way to do it locally. You've got to know where the other towns are going to be. And I really wanted the towns to at least semi-make sense. There's a lot of randomness to it. If somebody has an idea on how I could do it, but it's a similar thing to rivers. You got to know where the river starts, and you got to plot the river. And so if I'm sitting at the mouth of the river, I had to have calculated some amount of far away to know. Like over here, we've got these rivers that go all the way out of this tile. So if I was in this tile, I had to have calculated the river to know that it exited this tile and went into the other tile. And I kind of feel like roads and cities and towns are going to be the same way. You know, this town needs to know about this town, or it doesn't know that there's a trade route between them. But yeah, I mean, ideally it would be nice to make everything as local as possible. Just for a network of cities and towns, I just don't see how that could work. You kind of have to know the layout of the land. Already, I think it's going to take some pretty clever stuff to iteratively kind of go out in the background and regenerate the rest of this stuff without making it weird. Yeah, but the cracks are generated irrespective of anything else going on, and you can't just generate a sea trade route wherever you want. It has to be on the ocean. And similar to, these roads, they try not to cross a mountain, for example. They'll take the path of least resistance. So they kind of have to have some intelligence as far as how they're routed, and they're based on the terrain. So the terrain already has to be generated. Yeah, it's just, I don't see. Look, we know there's going to be bridges there. That's what the green lines mean. We know there's going to be a bridge. It's kind of cool. Again, this is a huge bridge. So anyway, this is the state of the algorithm at this point, which I think it looks pretty cool. It took me a lot of time to get there, but it makes some pretty neat little these routes, because these cities were close to each other, so they generated trade, but these are far apart, so it was actually easier for trade to go around. So just general sort of networking type of algorithms. Like, yeah, it's kind of cool. Like these guys here. This guy probably plotted a route to him and figured out it was actually easier to take existing routes. It was less expensive to use the roads that were already there than to try to plot a road across these cracked things. Anyway, any other questions? I'll give it a beat. Yeah, it's just, yeah. I think probably chat may not be the best. Video chat, maybe a more interactive form. We could go back and forth on this, especially with the 30-second delay. So I don't know if you're on the Discord or, but so far this is what I got, and it's a long time coming. I can't wait to see these actually plotted in the real world, and of course with smaller paths and cool little points of interest and stuff. Are there any other questions? Yeah, the downsides you mentioned, yeah. It's a tricky problem. I think there's probably, I discover every day good reasons why no one's done it before, right? It's just a tricky problem. But hopefully we'll come up with a solution that'll make something that we all want to play and explore. Alright, so, okay, thanks James. Yeah, definitely join the Discord. Even if you're not a patron, you can join the public Discord. Just shoot me an IM somewhere, and I'll. So anybody on the chat who doesn't know already, if you are trying to send me an email, simsilica.com, IMPspeed. So obviously, if you can use your non-AI brain to plot that into an actual email address, then I won't get spam from algorithms that are harvesting that sort of thing. All right, I think that was a long stream. I think I touched on quite a few things that probably I could have gone into more detail. But feel free to ask questions in the video, like, comment, subscribe, and so on. And thank you all for joining. Hopefully this was educational, and I will see you online. Go forth and do great things.